You are listening to Rouge Radio, a proud member of the Canadian Football Podcast Network.
It's time to get the point as Rouge Radio is ready to kick off.
Ready!
The best football talk with the best in the business.
So what is the cost? You have 2 first-round picks this year because the Argos are dumb enough to trade for Drew Willie.
A few rookies.
We go directly to the on-field product. We welcome to the show the 20th overall pick in this past Sunday's CFL draft, DeAndre Wright of the Alouettes. DeAndre, welcome to the show.
Thank you, guys. Thank you for having me.
And the occasional Hall of Famer.
Please welcome Doug Brown, who is one of the members of the current class of 2016 in the CFL Hall of Fame. Doug, thanks for joining us today.
Oh, thank you guys for the kind words and for having me on the program.
Rouge Radio is on the air. Here's your hosts, Robert Dalton and Tony Allen.
You know, it's days like this that make me want to it makes me miss having access to the old Swagger and Stagger show archives. Do you remember that, Tony? Do you remember the old Swagger and Stagger show that we used to have?
I think I may have been under the umbrella of the Swagger and Stagger show for at least one season for sure.
You know what, and the reason why, obviously everybody is, by the way, this is the Rouge Radio podcast, powered by the Canadian Football Podcast Network. My name is Robert Dalton, and joining me, as you've already heard, Mr. Tony Allen. If everybody has been watching the NFL playoffs and this past Sunday, there's a couple of things that happen that make you really love the CFL. Now, I don't want to compare the two or say one is better than the other. That's not what we're going to do. But do you remember that epic 10-minute rant that you had? I think it was brought on by an email. So one of our listeners had an email and talking up the NFL, saying how superb it was and everything about it was better. Then you had that epic 10-minute rant, and it boiled down to a coin toss. And you said someone's going to win the Super Bowl because of a freaking coin toss. Well, someone's going to the Super Bowl because of a freaking coin toss. Yeah.
It already happened. The New England Patriots 2 years ago beat the Atlanta Falcons because they won a coin toss.
Well, the Atlanta Falcons lost the Super Bowl because they couldn't hold a 28-3 lead, but I digress. But so when that happened, I didn't watch any of the games, so I'm not going to comment. This is a CFL podcast, and I'm not going to comment too much about that. But when I heard that happened, I automatically thought about that rant, and it brought a tear to my eye because I missed that rant, and I have no shows from that year, no shows whatsoever.
It was quite popular. I do remember that. So, and I do remember that point specifically going on. I mean, I elaborated. It came down to pointing out flaws in a unflawed league, and that was one of the big ones. And I will say, since that podcast, we've had 2 teams go on to a Super Bowl, the Seattle Seahawks and now the New England Patriots. And we also had a Super Bowl champion. Regardless of a lead blown, it went to overtime because both teams had scored as many points, and a coin toss decided that one as well. So that's, at least since we've been doing Rouge Radio and that rant, that is 3 significant playoff games that were lost because the team won the coin toss, got a touchdown, and the opposition didn't get a chance to touch the football. And I believe, at least since this podcast went on the air, not one single Grey Cup has been won because a team got into scoring position in a tied game and kicked a Rouge through the end zone to win it.
I've seen games end on a missed field goal, but not to win it. But I mean, that's a different story. We've got a great show to start off 2019. We'll talk about the major things that have happened, signings, re-signings, I guess you could say, in certain teams. A coach has jumped ship, and of course we'll get to your emails. But first, Tony, how are your holidays? Did you miss me?
I have. Actually, I joked with you earlier today via the text that I'm very rusty at being able to get prepared for one of these shows because it's just one of those things that the holidays came in and you kind of get engulfed in that. Excuse me, you get engulfed in that. And then I have other things going with my career as I'm back in school again, trying to become a journeyman electrician. And then the kids have school. It gets so caught up. And then whenever I get a text from you, it's like, you want to do a show? It's like, of course I want to do a show. And then life just bombards you again and you forget a little bit. So it seems a little weird to be doing this again, only because I expect now the CFL season to just be around the corner. But unfortunately, we are not that close. We can joke about is it June yet? And before you know it, we'll be doing our 9 teams in 9 weeks. But it is still pretty far away until we have to get too deep into the Canadian Football League season.
Preseason starts in May. We can actually have the hashtag "Is it May yet?" That's awesome. I'm a procrastinator, so just before we got to recording, I had to run up and get a couple of things, and one of the things was a couple of dad jokes. And if you follow me on Twitter, you know that my gracious wife decided to buy me a game called Laugh or Lose. And you might have seen this. A lot of, most notably, I think Will Ferrell and Mark Wahlberg had this dad joke off, I guess. You might have actually seen it on the Rouge Radio between me and Andrew from the Eskimo Empire podcast and have those dad joke offs. But, so I got this from the wife, and I was looking forward to using it every Rouge Radio episode. And I've been looking for it, and I was like, and of course, I left it to the last minute before I found one. The wife and I, we got the kids to play it probably about an hour ago, so that would have been fun too. So I got a lot of I don't know the words for it, but but I got a lot of laughter out of it. So I brought two to end the show for you.
Excellent.
Let's start off with the first show of 2019, episode 369. And it just seems that episode 300 was just like yesterday. Man.
Yeah, it does, actually, now you mention it.
A couple of big signings. Let's get the little tidbits, because I know that there's huge things that we need to talk about. Let's get the couple of there were major signings. Kamar Jordan signs a brand new extension to remain with the Calgary Stampeders. And Adam Bighill signs a 3-year extension, 3-year contract to stay in Winnipeg to shore up that middle linebacking position that Winnipeg has sorely needed prior to the 2018 season. Tony, because these two signings involve our teams, you're a Stamp fan, I'm a Bomber fan. What was the biggest signing of those two?
Obviously, Bighill is going to be the biggest. I think without playing the Stampeder fan card and trying to get back into my somewhat neutral mode as we go through the show, it is kind of hard not to pick Adam Bighill as the biggest signing, because if that guy got anywhere near free agency or other teams got to talk to him, they would have gone after him pretty hard, and it was kind of impossible to deny how he dominated the Canadian Football League last year. Between the two of them, as where Kamar Jordan was just extremely important to the Stampeders in a potent receiving core, there is no doubt everybody feared Adam Bighill, and he was one of the biggest game changers through 2018.
Definitely, and I'm not taking anything away from Kamar Jordan, just because he was an important factor to the Calgary Stampeders en route to the Grey Cup, although didn't play a lot down the stretch, but he was still important getting them to where they were. To at least host a playoff game in the West Final, and it definitely played a big role in years past. So you look at that, and then you look at the difference that Adam Bighill. I look back at that first game, the first game of the season. The rain interrupted game between Edmonton and Winnipeg, and you and I both, we thought that Edmonton was going to be a perennial Grey Cup contender that year, and we thought, okay, Winnipeg has added Adam Bighill. Their defense should have improved. After that game, we thought, okay, Edmonton proved that they're a Grey Cup contender. When the Winnipeg's defense really didn't improve a lot. You saw some plays that Bighill made, but you didn't really prove a lot. As the season progressed, we saw that Edmonton went the other direction, and Adam Bighill made a big difference in that. I think, if not first or second, maybe third in a lot of defensive categories. And if they weren't first or second, or if they were third, they were third to the Stampeders and the Saskatchewan Roughriders, who have tremendous defense. So that just says loads of what the difference that Adam Bighill did. And you're right, had he had been close to free agency, there would have been a lot of teams that would have paid what the Bombers were paying him, and it rumored around to be $230,000, including an $100,000 signing bonus, which he won't get until that CBA gets ratified. J.C. Sherritt retires. As a Stampeder fan, it's got to be the one guy that you're kind of glad that he's retiring, but it's not a guy that you kind of wish that he would have played on, and obviously injuries played a huge role. His career over 8 years, stemming from 2012 or 2011 to last year, 109 games played, 507 defensive tackles, 15 sacks, or 15 special team tackles, 14 sacks, and 1 interception, and 17 forced fumbles over his 8-year career. And that is including the 1 year where he only played 1 game because he suffered that ACL injury in Game 1 in 2017. Tony, any final thoughts to J.C. Sherritt?
You know what? This was a guy that I think you can see. If I can see the potential in a player in preseason, then it pretty much shows how good this guy was. Because I am not a scout. I do not have a life experience of being able to see talented football players. But when there was a guy as good as J.C. Sherritt, I would watch those preseason games when TSN started to air them, and you watched this guy, you knew he was going to be something special. And maybe I just noticed extra because I realized how this guy was going to impact the Battle of Alberta moving forward because he was so good. And the one thing I can really just say, looking back on his career, he played the game right. And that's the one thing I think you have to respect more than anybody. There's those guys that are entertaining because they can talk trash. And there's guys out there that make a name of themselves playing dirty. But J.C. Sherritt played the game of football right, the way you would want every kid to watch and grow up to be that kind of football player. So although he was on the wrong side of the Battle of Alberta that I would have preferred, there is no way in the world you could pay me any money to say anything wrong about J.C. Sherritt and the mark and impact he left on the Canadian Football League.
Yeah, I can't say anything further than that, than what you, other than just to echo your sentiments, because, from a guy he's a community guy, well known in the Edmonton community, and he was a hard-nosed player, just got your prototypical CFL linebacker, and it's a guy who you really wanted on your team because he played within the whistle. He wasn't dirty. I don't recall him getting an unsportsmanlike conduct penalty or anything like that. Just a very good guy who is really tough to play against, and it's a rare that we're talking about a guy like this who's probably maybe a first ballot Hall of Famer, but is a guy that has spent his entire CFL career with one team. Moving on, and you knew that we had to talk about this. Chris Jones signs an extension, and I thought that was big news, right? Because everybody was talking about Jones having interest in the NFL. He had 1 year left on his contract. He signs an extension with the Riders, signs his coordinators to a 2-year extension, and then a week later he bolts to the Cleveland Browns. Now I'm not saying anything bad about him because he had an opportunity, but my God, again, this reminds me of past archives. I think it was Jamie Nye that you had, right? We were doing our 9 teams in 9 weeks, and you were talking about what kind of impression that Chris Jones would have because he had a history of leaving teams prior to their contracts, right? And I can't remember. I'm paraphrasing to be like, his situation with Calgary, where John Huffnagel was wondering where Chris Jones was going. He's like, hey, I just see that he landed in Toronto, and this is almost as fast that Chris Jones landed in Cleveland. So I saw on Twitter, I think it was either Twitter or Facebook on your, and I can never get them because sometimes you leave certain things to Facebook and certain things to Twitter, but you said it was the ultimate gut punch to Rider Nation. So I would maybe elaborate on that.
Well, I only meant because I remember after the 2004 Stanley Cup run, and I got home from work because I was doing mornings, and they had their rally in Victoria Park in downtown Calgary, and I watched it on TV. It was broadcast all over Calgary television. I think I picked it up on a satellite channel somewhere, but regardless, I watched it, and I watched Craig Conroy get up in front of that microphone and announce that the Calgary Flames have unfinished business. He was going to be an unrestricted free agent. Obviously, it was one of the big questions. He had been a captain with the Calgary Stampede or Calgary Flames before giving that to Jerome McGinley. He was a Calgary Flame, one of those guys that you just loved having on your hockey team. And he stood up in front of the thousands of people and even thousands watching on television and told Calgary Flames fans he's got unfinished business in Calgary and he'll be back. Free agency kicked in, and he was one of the first players to sign. He went to the Los Angeles Kings. And I just remember how that felt. And it was like, you try to keep it in perspective. I wouldn't say betrayal. It was just like, God damn it. Like, why did you have to stand up in front of there and say that you've got unfinished business? Like, why did you phrase it? Why didn't you just go up and say it was a great year and then move on? But you told us you were coming back to do it again, and we were ready to have Craig Conroy back in our lineup for the 2004-2005 season, which eventually got wiped out anyway, so it doesn't matter. But it's still there. And so for Chris Jones to do the exact same thing and under less time, I would have to say for Riders fans, it was okay to be upset. There is that element of letdown. Again, betrayal seems a little bit dramatic and over the top, but there is that letdown of people liked Chris Jones. There was Rider fans that didn't. There was Rider fans that did. So whatever. The Riders fans that did enjoy having Chris Jones and thought that he was taking the team in the right direction. Here you go. You've got a little bit of security now. The guy that you really enjoy, you think is taking your team to be competitive in the West, maybe have a Grey Cup in their future, and he tells you he's got unfinished business. That was a great season the Saskatchewan Roughriders had last year, and then I'm going to come back and finish it. All right, Chris Jones is in this thing for the long run, and then boom, he's gone. What was the unfinished business talk? Like, you win. Again, if you want to go, fine, but the unfinished business thing is the part that always bothers me with these athletes, and they have a right to do whatever they want to. Just don't go up in front of us and tell us you've got unfinished business and then take off.
I think right now is just the point where if you use that unfinished business tagline, which the Bombers started in after their 2001 Grey Cup run, and then starting in 2002, obviously they lost that one. They had that tagline, unfinished business. So I think anybody who uses that tagline, you pretty much curse yourself. And it's unfortunate because of that. I don't think anybody's begrudging Chris Jones for the opportunity. I just think that right now is that there had to have been some kind of knowledge that he was going to go down south. So for him to come up with that unfinished business, sign the extension, and then less than a week later, it took the bull to Cleveland. Now, I mean, it's a great opportunity because he's starting from day one, right? Because he mentioned that, with the new head coach, someone he's familiar with. You don't want to start in a made-up position, right? What is it? Defensive specialist? That's his coaching title. Or
yeah, he's not even. And the thing is, like I said, I'm in school right now, and there's a Riders fan that sits beside me. He's a friend of mine. He listens to our podcast, and I was beside him when the little notification binged on my iPad. I'm like, oh, check this out. And his initial reaction after reading the story and kind of seeing what he was leaving for, his only reaction was like, he's not even leaving. He's not even going to be a real coach. That was his reaction. He's like, he's not even leaving to be a real coach. He's not leaving with the prospect of eventually becoming the head coach of the Cleveland Browns or having a chance to head coach in the National Football League. He is basically leaving to be I had the word and I lost it. He is essentially, what's the word I'm looking for? A consultant is basically all he is. That's what he has left a general manager job and a head coach for, is to just be a consultant. You're not going to, if you're starting there, you'll be retired before you get anywhere close to being a head coach in the National Football League.
Now, granted, being a consultant pays a lot. Especially, I know a lot of consultants, and just from knowing them, I'd be willing to trade bank accounts. I can tell you that much. Other
Wait,
writer.
are you like a Sensi consultant or an Epicure consultant? Is that why you're sticking up for consultants?
No. I just know what kind of bank they got.
Okay.
So that's all. Other rider news: Rod Peterson, the voice of the Riders for the last 20 years, has announced his retirement. I should say retirement. He's stepping away from the voice of the Saskatchewan Roughriders. I don't think he's said where he's going, but that's a huge hole. Like, we've talked about Rod Peterson and how his homer opinions towards the Saskatchewan Roughriders in the past, but guy was a damn good play-by-play guy, and that's a huge hole. So I know that we've ranted about this guy in the past, but you got to give him his due.
If you don't have anything nice to say, don't say anything at all. That's what I was raised on. So he has left, and that's all I can say about that.
All right. So I kind of just forgot to put that in the itinerary, and I just kind of launched that in there. Just kind of like, to stir the pot there. I put the Chris Jones part here in the itinerary because the next subject, there was a lot of people. First, I'll get your thoughts on this one, because over the weekend on Saturday, the Saskatchewan Roughriders had requested permission to speak with Ottawa Redblacks offensive coordinator Jamie Elizondo, and they were denied. Nobody has actually came out and said why. They just said that they denied the Riders permission. Great. There's a lot of flack saying, well, that's a dick move, blah, blah, blah. Some people said, well, they didn't want to because they were afraid that Trevor Harris was going to leave with them. Okay. Nobody said anything. That kind of went away after a couple of hours. The next day it was reported that the Winnipeg Blue Bombers had denied the Saskatchewan Roughriders permission to speak to offensive coordinator Paul Lapalisse. And, well, because it's the Bombers, the Rider fans still haven't shut up about that, but I digress. To be honest with you, and I know a lot of people will point out to in previous times where coaches have been hired later. Yeah, that's coaches being hired, right? And in previous years, the season has started earlier. And I'm not going to defend the Red Blacks or the Bombers. The point is, it's not their job to help the Saskatchewan Roughriders. It's their job to focus on job number one, to win the Grey Cup in November. And part of that involves free agent acquisitions, which is less than a month away. Well, at the time when I originally went on Twitter to state that. February 12th, which is 3 weeks away now. My math is not up to snuff right now. It's approximately 3 weeks away right now. Are you expecting either team to be without one of their primary coaches 3 weeks before free agent? That's how you sell free agents, because you have guys like this. Are you expecting? I don't know. I'm throwing up a receiver. If Ottawa was expected to go after Brian Burnham, are you expecting Brian Burnham to say, "Yeah, I'd love to go there," especially now that you don't have Jamie Elizondo and Trevor Harris bolted along with him? That's not a good selling point. Do you want someone to go to Winnipeg and say, "Yeah, you know that offense that's been top of each category offensively for the past 3 years? Yeah, the guy behind that, he's no longer there." Do you see how that works? Now, I understand people saying that, well, you don't want to deny someone an opportunity to advancement in the league, and that's a fair point. That is a fair point. At some point there has to be some kind of mention or an explanation as why. But again, they're not required to, right? But the Bombers, the Red Blacks, their sole job is to prepare mentally or what have you, get the players in play so that when May or June starts, when that week one starts, that they're on the path to the goal in November, which is a Grey Cup title. Not to help the Saskatchewan Roughriders, and maybe it would help them if they get the Riders fans their panties up all in a bunch, but I digress on that one. It's not their job. Is it a dick move? yeah, you have your arguments there. Is it really going to be short-sighted? Is it really going to bite them in the rear end? Nah, in a 9-team league, it's really not going to be a big deal. Tony, what are your thoughts?
My thoughts are this simple. In Paul LaPolice's career, how many players have he taken aside, sat down, and said, "Listen, I can't use you in this situation. You aren't ready for this situation. I need this guy to play. You're going to sit out. I'm sorry. I know you want a chance to prove yourself, but I'm not putting you in. Sit down." And then he sends somebody else in. Essentially, that is what the Blue Bombers and the Ottawa Red Blacks have done. Listen, we need you here. We need to think of our team, period. There's going to be overanalyzing all over the place. For as many times as Paul LaPolice has taken players who wanted to go somewhere else, who wanted to start, who wanted to play. Paul LaPolice took those guys and said, "No, you're sitting on the bench today. You're sitting on the bench this drive. I'm not putting the ball in your hands." And now Winnipeg's done it to him. That is the sport. So Paul LaPolice does not have any ground to complain because he wanted to go somewhere else and Winnipeg benched him. Said, "Nope, I need you to play this role. I want off special teams, Lapo. Give me on defense." "Nope, you're a special teams guy. I need you on that specials team." That is what is in the best interest of this football club. And that's what happened to him. He's no sour grapes. He needs to understand that. Nobody can look at that situation and blame the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. It's that simple. We can overanalyze it all we want. We can complain if we're Riders fans because we didn't get our way. But that's not how it works. In this situation, just like Paul LaPolice has probably done to 1,000 football players, he said, "Nope, we need you right here. You are part of this team. It's in the best interest of this team. This is what we need to do."
So we know who won't be interviewing for the head coaching spot in Saskatchewan. A couple of interviews took place today, or maybe they already took place yesterday, recording Wednesday, January 23rd. Stephen McAdoo and Craig Dickinson both were on the Riders coaching staff last year. They have interviewed. So the question here is, who do you think is going to be the next Riders head coach? I'll get your thoughts about this one because I think it's interesting that this coaching cap, and I don't know your thoughts about this one. I think it's interesting the way that they're trying to enforce it, limiting the amount that you spend and limiting the amount of coaches that you can have on your staff. Because Chris Jones had multiple hats, well, guess what? He decided to cap his team at 11. So once he left, he had 3 spots to fill, but only 1 spot to fill it with. Likely scenario, this probably didn't mean that Paul LaPolice or Jamie Elizondo was a good fit to begin with, so you have to hire within, because if you hire someone without, what guy is going to want to come into a situation and not have his own guys? So ideally, Mike Benavides and guys like Jerry Glanville, they make sense because they're great guys who can hold dual spots. But again, you're going to have to deal with the likes of Stephen McAdoo, guys with Craig Dickinson. Those aren't your guys. As good as you might think that they are, they're not your guys. You're setting yourself to be a lame duck coach or setting them up to be lame duck coordinators. So in my guess, ideally, you either have someone like Craig Dickinson move up to head coach, hire Mike Benavides as defensive coordinator, and have someone hire within to replace Craig Dickinson as special teams coordinator. That's an ideal world. Whether or not that happens, they've got some time to figure that out. But that's my thought. Tony?
Yeah. I think it's one of those situations where you have to kind of take it from inside. The way that Chris Jones set the team up for the Saskatchewan Roughriders for the future really hurts them moving forward now. Because he was the head coach and the defensive coordinator, he built the team he wanted. And fine, Jeremy O'Day is going to come in and play the general manager duty, so he kind of has a concept of what Chris Jones's plan was. Unfortunately, outside of that, nobody else knows what Chris Jones's plan was. I mean, we can barely figure out if he knew the difference between a receiver and a cornerback for the most of last season. He's built that team specifically for him. which means any coach you bring in now has absolutely no idea what Chris Jones was thinking when he put that defense together and basically the football team. Because I don't even know if he really included O'Day in the day-to-day operations or told him what his plan was or just said, give me the money, I want to go get these guys. So O'Day's got to figure out what's going to go into those pieces with Chris Jones. And if you do bring in a head coach outside of the organization, they don't know what in the hell Chris Jones' plan was. The only one that might have an idea is a coach inside the team. So you basically have to stay there. If you don't, you need to try and rebuild this whole team again under what the new head coach wants, because he doesn't know how to use what Chris Jones built. And I'm sorry, you can say professionals, they know what to do, they can manage players. Let's be honest, we all kind of got an idea of what Chris Jones was. Chris Jones believed in Chris Jones and had complete faith in Chris Jones and not necessarily everybody else around him. And I think it would be very difficult for a coach to go in there, look at Chris Jones's plan and group of players and be like, I don't know what this guy was doing. Where was he going with this football team when he put it together? Because he ran the defense and then did head coaching things. If you can get a guy that can come in and do both and pick up where he left off and understand the playbook, then that's fine. I think the best option is to stay within Saskatchewan. I could probably see it being Craig Dickinson if you told me to make a decision right now, because we're talking about their head coach. I can see it being him, but it's got to be a coach that knows what Chris Jones was doing, because if it's not, someone else has got to come in and try and figure this out. And like you say, get it ready for draft day to know what their needs are and where their needs are to be prepared to move on from whatever Chris Jones had built there as a franchise.
The good thing about Chris Jones not being there is they're now able to focus on offense. I think now everybody's going to point to the stats that Kevin Glenn and his plethora of receivers that he had in 2017, that stats, and that's great. But in his 3 years in Saskatchewan, offensively, 2 out of the 3 years, they weren't that great. and now they don't even have a quarterback under contract. I think they've got David Watford, and then they might actually have another one who saw less playing time last year. So I expect him to go into free agency looking for a quarterback. Hello, Trevor Harris, possibly. But they now have that keen eye looking for, hey, we need to really upgrade that offense because they were god-awful last year. Defensively, they say that defenses really aren't that difference between, it's all about schemes and game planning. So the defenses aren't really that different. You have the same roster defensively. You're probably going to have to miss a couple because you're wanting to focus on the offense. So, dare I say, goodbye, Willie Jefferson. You've got Ed Gainey. You've got Nick Marshall. You've got Charleston Hughes. You've got Zach Evans. Those are premier talent in the CFL. You're going to win some games with those guys. Now, they're probably not going to have the turnovers, the touchdowns that they did last year, but you're going to win some games with that defense, regardless if it's the same defensive philosophy. So, I mean, we'll get to more predicting how that season goes when we get to the Saskatchewan Roughriders in our 9 teams in 9 weeks. But again, this happens when you're going through these changes so close to free agency. But that is the good thing of Chris Jones leaving. The bad thing about Chris Jones leaving is that was a freaking good defense. You're not going to duplicate that 2 years in a row, especially when you don't have the guy at the helm that was calling those plays. That was a freaking good defense. And I made the comment last year that, man, if Winnipeg in that Western semifinal made one turnover, Saskatchewan wins that game. Just one turnover and Saskatchewan wins. But I digress. Let's get on to emails before we shut her down for the first episode of 2019. Hey, speaking of the Western semifinal, Darlene from Yorkton says, the guys at the Piffles podcast said that if Zach Larles was healthy, they would have won that game in the Western semifinal. Dalts, as a Bomber fan, do you agree with that? I said before, and you could actually go back to that episode when we were previewing the semifinals. I said, and I'm paraphrasing, that I had a funny feeling that Winnipeg was going to pull out that game. And the main thing was that offense was dreadful. Winnipeg's defense was playing good. The difference between Winnipeg's defense last year and Saskatchewan's offense was bigger than the difference between Winnipeg's offense and Saskatchewan's defense. Saskatchewan's defense was better than Winnipeg's defense, but the margin for error was on the side of Winnipeg's defense. That's what I'm saying. So if Winnipeg played mistake-free football, which they did, they would have won the game, which they did. So I respect the guys from Piffles because I think they're a rarity in Saskatchewan where they're not homers. But I would have to disagree, Darlene, that Zach Collaros, because with Zach Collaros was when they announced that he wouldn't be playing, I had visions of Rocky Butler. And for those who don't know who Rocky Butler is, rewind back to 2002. Unfinished business, as I said, Winnipeg. Going into Labor Day, and I can't remember who was their starting quarterback. I think it was Nealon Green. He was often injured. Kevin Glenn was their backup. He wasn't able to go. In comes third stringer Rocky Butler, and he had the worst passing stats of anybody. Like Johnny Manziel in his first career start would have been envious of those stats. But the guy ran for like 300 yards and 2 TDs, and that was good enough to win that game. Saskatchewan did not deserve to win that game, aside from a running quarterback. Where have I heard that in Labor Day before? But I digress. That's enough ranting on that one. So I had visions of Rocky Butler version 2.0, and to his point and to his part, Brandon Bridge wasn't horrible. He was horrible through the air, which is where Zach Collaros probably would have been better, which is where they're saying that. But Brandon Bridge was hurting the Bombers' D on the ground. All their first downs that Saskatchewan had was based on Brandon Bridge running, scrambling, which is not something that Zach Collaros would have been able to do. So to that point, that really counters the aerial attack that Zach Collaros would have been able to bring. So do I think it would have been a minor difference stats-wise? Yeah, the game still would have resulted in a Bomber win, and that's my opinion. Yeah, you can tell me where to shove it, but Tony, any thoughts on that one before we get to the second email?
He didn't play. He didn't play. What's the point of that? He didn't play, so it doesn't matter. He didn't play. I don't know why you would claim that, because you can't back it up. I don't care what theoretical scenarios you can come up with. You still can't back it up. To say that if Zach Collaros, they would have won. How? Back it up. Prove it. We can't play the game again. Ask if the Bombers and the Riders, if they'll all get back together and let Zach Collaros win, because that's how it was supposed to happen. He didn't play, and they didn't win. And you cannot prove that the result would have been any better. If anything, if Zach Collaros plays, he gets injured, he throws 4 interceptions, he gets absolute, and the Bombers win even more. You cannot claim that. It is impossible to claim something like that. The only thing you could foresee is Zach Collaros not playing in the game, because he's Zach Collaros. Zach Collaros gets injured all the time. I called it before the season started. Zach Collaros will not see week number 4. He did not see week number 4. Is it because I don't like Zach Collaros? No. Is it because I can see into the future? No, because it's Zach Collaros, and he gets injured. And Zach Collaros didn't play because he was injured. Why? Because he's Zach Collaros. That is the only thing that you could ever predict, anticipate, is that there might be a chance you didn't have Zach Collaros for the West semifinal because he's Zach Collaros.
You just brought up a point, or not a point, but you mentioned that they should have rewound and brought the Bombers back to replay that game. Did you hear the NFL lawsuit that came out yesterday?
Yes, that they want to bring the 2 teams back
for the 2 minutes.
And good luck to that guy.
I just was like, just for the entertainment value, I want that lawsuit to go places. I want it to go as long as they can take it.
I know. Just arguments like that one are like the guys that say, "Oh, I can't believe nobody drafted. I can't believe we picked this guy in the NHL draft and not this guy because look how amazing he is." Well, he was ranked 107th, and every team passed on him because nobody thought he was that good. And because he's good that now, you can't go back in time and look like a genius and say, "Oh, we should have picked him because look at how many points he had." Well, every team in the NHL passed on him. Because look at Johnny Gaudreau, for example. We got him in the 4th round, 5th round, which means every team passed on him at least 5 times. So you can't go back and say, "Oh, we had an opportunity." Everybody had an opportunity. You can't go back and look like you understood what was going to happen because of the end result. You can't do it. It's not good for them to try and play that card. It's just you lost, move on. We lost because we didn't have Zach Collaros because Zach Collaros is injury prone. That is the entire breakdown of last year's West semifinal. Why did you lose? We didn't have Zach Collaros. Fine. Why didn't you have Zach Collaros? Because the guy always gets injured. How did you not see this coming?
All right, moving on to the second email. Sean from Brandon. Any predictions for free agency? Yeah, Tony, any?
My only prediction is, and unless something's happened and I didn't notice, my biggest prediction is the most sought-after player should be, in my opinion, is Loeffler being an unrestricted free agent in Winnipeg. Because with Adam Bighill getting wrapped up, I think he is one of the most prized assets out there on the free agent market. As a Canadian and a guy who is excellent as his position, there will be a lot of people throwing money around this guy to try and bring him in. And more specifically, I don't see Alex Singleton coming back. So if you want one prediction just for fun to banter about or get angry about because someone thought something, I will predict Loeffler will land at the Calgary Stampeders.
Oh, wow. You know what? I think Loeffler is going to go to BC. He's from there. He's got history, and at Herfey, he's made some comments that he's not going to be afraid to shell out a little bit more money to get those free agents. And it's funny. I had a Twitter conversation with one of our listeners, and actually asked me. He said, "Do you think it's possible that the Winnipeg Blue Bombers retain both Loeffler and Adam Bighill?" And I said, and I literally said, I'd have to actually look in the DMs, but I said, I don't think it's possible to keep both. They'll keep one, and it's probably going to be Adam Bighill. I didn't think that he would sign this soon, but Adam Bighill literally made my prediction come true. So likelihood, Taylor Loeffler is he's going to get paid. He is going to get paid. He is a Canadian all-star safety. You don't get a lot of those lately. You don't see a lot of those lately. He is going to get paid. And if Winnipeg, not saying that he's not worth it, but I tell you what, if Winnipeg decides to shell out that money for him, which he's worth it, really going to dig yourself a hole in other areas where you probably should. And I'm looking at that receiver position. So I guess we're both of us, to answer your question, Sean, both of us predict that maybe the prediction is Taylor Loeffler is going to bolt. Tony think he's going to go to Calgary. I think he's going to go to BC.
Do you think he'll be the first card off the table?
No.
Do you think he'll be the first chip off the table?
No, I think Odell.
And that's not including I think Trevor Harris signing in Ottawa is a foregone conclusion. Mm-hmm. Obviously, Bo Levi Mitchell coming back, signing in Calgary, I believe is a foregone conclusion. But Mike Riley, I think he's going to buy his time on free agency, so we won't see him sign anywhere on day one or within the first couple of hours. But I was just thinking the first chip to fall sounds like you're going to say Odell Willis.
I was going to say, because I don't know if he's under contract, but I just want Odell Willis to be released and then signed again by Ed Hervey. Just to break tampering laws. Even though he's a free agent, it's just to sign him just before free agency starts. I just want to see that. Other than that, I don't really have a prediction as far as who see. you know what? I'm going to go by the league's top free agent list, and I'll give you my answer after we go through the third one here. Hey guys, love the new site. Yes, we got a new site, rougeradio.ca. Go there, leave us a message here. You keep me entertaining, up to speed on the CFL from down south. Ken from Sacramento.
Ooh.
Well, thank you, Ken.
Go Gold Miners.
Ken is our one listener in California.
All right.
Yeah, it's good to go. Tony, any final thoughts?
No, just it's nice to be kind of popping in here and have something to talk about. The CFL has given us a little bit of news, but other than that, watch Titans on Netflix if you're a comic book fan. This is going to be my confession to you, Dalts, at the end of the show, and just kind of pump this awesome show. I've got addicted to Titans. It's based on the Teen Titans comic book. Robin has his own superpower team with Raven, Beast Boy, Starfire, and either way, it's fun if you like comic book stuff. Extremely violent. Do not let your kids watch this at all. I'm barely old enough to watch this show, and I'm 42. That's how graphic and a bit scary it is. But my commission was, I was right, and I'm binge watching it, and I get a text from Dalton. I'm like, I'm going to be a couple minutes behind. And I'm like, yes, I am also going to be behind because I completely forgot I agreed to do this tonight because I'm obsessed with this show. So that is my CFL, #CFL podcast confessions, is that I was ready. I had just completely forgot because I was engulfed in this show.
Is this going to be your new thing? Where, you know how I have the dad jokes, you have like your obsession of Netflix binging?
Yeah, it's possible if they keep pumping out enough new stuff here. So maybe we'll see where that goes.
All right. So you asked me the question. I'm going through the CFL's top 30 free agents.
Yep.
The one guy that jumps off the list as a guy that I think is going to be the first one to get signed, Winnipeg offensive lineman, Suk Chung. I think he's going to want to get paid, and I think he's going to go out west. I don't know which team. I think he's from some BC, so it does make sense for him to go out to BC. I'd heard if he really wants to shore up that offensive line, although it's not in dire needs as it was in years past, but it makes a lot of sense and gives potentially where if Mike Riley lands there, which is one of my predictions, but I digress. I think Suk Chung is going to be the first one to go. That's my guess.
There you go. Good job.
All right. So that'll end it for episode 369. You can follow us on Twitter at Rouge Radio, myself at Rouge Dalts, Tony at Tony Rouge Radio. And, of course, like I said, you can leave us comments on our new website, rougeradio.ca. It's not completely done, but enough where you can actually leave a comment, just like a lot of our listeners did, like Ken from Sacramento. You've already gotten your final thoughts, so it's time for me to finish episode 369 with my dad jokes. I got two of them. My daughter wanted me to use one of them. Well, she actually wanted me to use one of hers, and I forgot to write it down. But she said she wants to listen to it on her show because she wants to listen to it. But I promise I'll say it on the next one. All right, here's the first one. These are from the Laugh and Lose dad joke game. I promised Tony I would use it. So, Tony, did you hear the rumor going around about butter?
No, what is the rumor going around butter?
Never mind, I shouldn't spread it.
There you go.
There we go. All right, this one's directed for you. What do you call a guy with no shins?
I don't know.
Tony.
Hey, that's my name. I made it.
In Word, this actually makes a lot more sense. You know, toe and the foot digit, and of course your kneecap. Get it, Tony?
Yep.
There we go.
I get it. I think I get it. I understand.
It's not as impressive if you have to explain it. Then of course, half of these dad jokes aren't as impressive unless you're actually reading it. Then you're busting a gut. All right, that'll do it for episode 369. For Tony, I'm Dalts. Thanks for listening. We'll see you in a couple of weeks.
Thanks for listening. Find more great shows like this at CF Pod Network on Twitter.